Washington, D.C., power flows through information. But what happens when the most sensitive military intelligence in the world ends up on the wrong phone? In the halls of power, a national security advisor makes a fatal miscalculation. On the other side of the world, a special forces team walks into a perfectly orchestrated trap. When the dust settles, 4 American soldiers are dead, 3 more captured. And the most catastrophic intelligence breach in modern history is just beginning to unravel. Signal Lost, a 6-part podcast thriller about betrayal, courage, and the devastating consequences of a world where even our most guarded communications are never truly secure. When everyone is listening, nowhere is safe. Signal Lost. Available wherever you get your podcasts.
It is the world's most secretive election. When a pope dies, ancient traditions begin. A silver hammer, a destroyed ring, over 100 cardinals locked away from the world, choosing the next leader of 1 billion faithful. White Smoke. The path to a new pope, from Calaroga Shark Media, wherever you get your podcasts.
Calaroga Shark Media.
Hey there, busy one today. I'm Johnny Mac with your daily comedy news. Let me do the A block and then I'll tell you what's going on. Long show today. Shockingly, I can't believe this. After Midnight, canceled by CBS. It seems like it was a mutual decision. Taylor Tomlinson has decided to return to stand-up. I saw this just after I put Thursday's show to bed, and I was like, whoa. Unfortunately, I couldn't jump in and make an edit. Sometimes I have to do other things like prep what I had to teach at my college class on Thursday morning. Taylor explains, I'm doing less stand-up than I was before hosting After Midnight. I was on tour 3 weekends a month for years, so to take this job and to know I was going to have to scale back a little bit was a very difficult decision for me. I wasn't sure if it was something I wanted to do or not, because stand-up is the most important thing to me. It's the most rewarding thing. Last month during a panel at South by, Taylor said, I'm doing less stand-up than I was before hosting After Midnight. I was on tour 3 weekends a month for years, so to take the job and know that I was going to have to scale back a little bit was very difficult for me. I wasn't sure if it was something I wanted to do or not, because stand-up is the most important thing to me. It's the most rewarding thing. I was very clear about that in the interview process. I was like, just so you know, this will never be my first love. This show will never be my thing. Stand-up is the most important thing to me, and as long as I can do both, I'd love to do both. Apparently, she meant it in a statement. Taylor Tomlinson thanked Stephen Colbert, producer of the show. She also thanked the staff and crew. CBS says it will not come up with a new 12:30 show. I don't think that's crazy. I think it's a different time. And I was thinking back, even when Letterman was on, my godmother bought me a VCR, and it was the greatest thing ever. I never watched Letterman live after that. In the early days before the VCR, in the summer, I would stay up until 1 o'clock in the morning. You couldn't even make it to the end of a Letterman, even though I was a teenager. During school, forget it. Watch a show at 12:30. How's that going to happen? And Letterman wasn't even on Friday. They had Friday night videos, so you couldn't even stay up late the one day. But I remember in the summer staying up, waiting for Dave to come on at 12:30, which is how I wound up watching Johnny Carson. It was the thing you stared at to kill time until 12:30. No internet. We had 5 channels. Totally different time, guys. I lived in Queens, New York. Queens, New York wasn't wired for cable until 1987. So yeah, you stared at Johnny Carson. Eventually Dave came on. I digress. CBS not coming up on the new 12:30 show. I don't think that's crazy at all. There's also some industry speculation now. Will NBC react and tell Seth Meyers, hey, thanks, man. Seth, if somebody says SNL, you might want to grab that gig. Unfortunately, as many as 200 staffers could be affected by the decision. Do 200 people work on After Midnight? Now, I get there are writers, I get there's a support staff, somebody's paying the bills, somebody's building the sets, somebody's booking the guests, somebody's letting the crowd in, somebody's editing the tape. I get it. 200? Yeah, that sounds like a lot. I worked on a TV show. Dr. Joy Brown had a syndicated talk show. Let's see, that was when I got my first computer and cell phone, circa 95, 96. That was an hour a day, 5 days a week. I can tell you we didn't have 200 people, But it was also a different time. The entire social media team was me, but there wasn't much social media to be done in 1995. It was more like going on, what would I go on, like AOL chats and stuff, trying to promote the show. I digress again. Late Nighter watched the end of Colbert's show, and at the end, Steven said, "This is the part of the show where I usually say, stick around for Taylor Tomlinson on After Midnight. I really enjoy doing that, not just because I'm an executive producer on that show, but because she's incredibly funny and I really like that show. Unfortunately, After Midnight is going to end in June. I believe the show had been picked up for a third season, so this sounds like Taylor has changed her mind and wants to go back to stand-up. That's what Taylor said in her statement. Colbert went on to reiterate what he had said in his press statement, according to Late Nighter. CBS just gave us a pickup for a third season, but Taylor has decided to return to stand-up full-time. And as someone who's done this job for 20 years, I completely respect her enormously as a comedian and for making a very hard decision on how to best use her time and talent. Colbert went on to thank CBS for their support. I've been doing this a long time, and you rarely have partners that good, meaning CBS. You'd have to work on one of these shows like we do to understand all the time and effort the amazing staff at After Midnight put into it, not only launching a new show, but also creating a new form of one of these shows for a late-night time slot. Are we going to pretend that Chris Hardwick didn't do this already? Are we going to do that, Steven? I mean, come on. It's hard to try something new, and it's rare for a network to say, we'd like more of that. I think this is a straight deal. I think this is Taylor wanted to go back to stand-up, but I'm not going to tell you that my spidey sense isn't tingling. So if I come on here Monday and I'm like, oh, I've got an update, don't be shocked. Did you watch John Mulaney this week? I haven't. I don't feel the need to watch it, which is a shame because I was so excited about it. As I put together the show, no Mulaney-related stories are organically coming to me. If I type in John Mulaney, still kind of nothing. I remembered Pete Davidson was the guest, and I typed in Pete Davidson, which surfaced something about Mulaney. So I don't think there's any buzz on that show. As I speak to you, it is 2:24 p.m. on Thursday. And I'm going to type in Netflix Top 10. I did this half an hour ago, so I know where I'm going here, but I'm going to do it again, quote unquote, live to you. So my source here is Netflix. I'm on Netflix.com, top 10 shows in the United States. Number 1, Adolescence. I hear that's really good. Number 2, The Residents. The guys at Trivia were talking about that. 3 is Bert Kreischer's Lucky. And so let's stop there. You know, how do you define top 10? I don't know. Streamer math can be a little wonky, and so you'll see something like Suits being quote-unquote number 1, but there's a lot of Suits. Like you could sit down and watch 16 hours of Suits, which might increase whatever metric they're looking at in total hours viewed, whatever. Bert Kreischer, it's an hour, as is John Mulaney. So those are kind of sort of equal. It's at least apples and a different type of apple. It's not apples and oranges. So I'm comparing an hour of Bert Kreischer and an hour of John Mulaney. So again, 1 is Adolescence, which again, you might binge and watch all, I don't know, is 4. The Residents, you might binge and watch, is there 8? I don't know. 3 is Bert Kreischer. 4 is the St. Patrick's Day episode of Raw. Not this week's, the March 17th one. That's interesting. 5 is Temptation Island Season 1. 6, Miss Rachel Season 1. 7, Running Point Season 1. 8, The Walking Dead, Dead City Season 1. 9, Zero Day Limited Series. That's pretty good. I watched that. 10, Beauty in Black Season 1. What did I not mention? Let me click on trending. Maybe it's trending. My source here, Netflix.com. I'm getting this from them. Let's see. They have not updated their page since March 13th. I can't help you, John. I've now clicked on what to watch. They want us to watch 5 chilling Stephen King adaptations you can stream right now. This page hasn't been updated since March 12th. I'm going to click on shows. My source, Netflix.com. Updated yesterday, meaning Wednesday at 11:11 a.m. $1 Million Secret. What to know about the players and their twisty new game. Popular now. Adolescence, Temptation Island, The Residents. What am I not mentioning? What word have I not said? That's right, listener. Mulaney. I have not said the word Mulaney. There's no buzz on this thing, even on Netflix's own site. I don't know what to make of it. I'm not here to bash John. You'll hear me talk with Jason Zinnemann from the New York Times on Sunday's episode. I have some thoughts about the show, but it's not working right now. All right, Pete Davidson was the guest this week. And since it's Pete Davidson, you have to ask him about his dating history. Llewellyn was on the couch or whatever they have on Mulaney's show and says, I want to know the mystique. To me, you're just an average guy, a regular guy, but you continuously pull all these bad B words, right? So I don't get it. I want to know the mystique. What I think for the research and for women across America is you should take me out. Pete said, if that's what it takes to stop this, yeah. Mulaney jumps in. We're going to move off Pete's personal life, so I wonder if that was discussed in advance. Lunel said, I just thought I would shoot my shot, because people want to know what is the mystique. Pete said, I don't know. Lunel, like, are you super fun? Are you a really good time? Pete seemed too embarrassed to answer the question, apparently. Mulaney jumps in. He has a real mystique. You have a real electricity to you. Mulaney argued that Pete Davidson is a wonderful guy, probably, to go to bed with. Lunel said, I wasn't tearing him down. I just want to know. I want to say right now, I don't want to sleep with you, I think, but I do want to go out. Pete said, okay, that sounds fair. Maybe I will put eyes on that one. Now I'm intrigued. An update from yesterday's lead story. Remember I told you that the show was stopped at the Melbourne Comedy Festival? Nothing funny here. A man died during the show. The man was in the back of the theater. Other members of the crowd attempted to give him emergency care for about 10 minutes before paramedics arrived. One audience member said it felt wrong to hear laughter from other folks in the crowd who were sitting closer to the stage and had no idea what was going on in the back of the venue of 2,900 people. The audience member said people started leaving on their own accord by groups in the second act, particularly as CPR was going on, which you could see. An ambulance was there. You could hear defibrillator sounds from across the room. Lighting was dark, though still light enough to see that a lady and man were interchanging doing chest compressions. Wow. One attendee told The Age paramedics had to commence their care in the dark using flashlights because the show was still going on. It was the most disgraceful, disgusting thing I've ever witnessed. I don't think I was the only person wondering if we were in some sort of dystopian parallel universe where we prioritize the show must go on over human life. Others at the show said up to 3 comedians kept doing their 5-minute sets after the man became ill. Wow. One audience member said it was only after a few people were leaving, got up, and were loudly talking or arguing with a staff member before leaning over and shouting at the comedian on stage to stop the show. The paramedics were there for a good 15 to 20 minutes in the dark doing CPR before the show stopped. Someone from the dress circle yelled to stop the show. Another guy yelled, someone is dying. An audience member says lighting was dark, though. Some comedians took to social media. Dave Hughes wrote, all performers' thoughts are with the family affected. Tahir Big Lick added, sad news, but correctly handled all round. Well done, everyone, and thoughts with those involved. I wasn't there. I don't know what's going on there. I also don't know what's going on with Nikki Glaser. A couple weird headlines from the news.co.uk. That's an Australian website. The headline, Gwyneth Paltrow exposes comedian Nikki Glaser for wanting to F her ex Ben Affleck. Subheading, Gwyneth has called out Nikki Glaser for wanting to hook up with Ben. I paraphrased that a little bit. This happened on the Goop podcast on Tuesday. Glaser would apparently find Ben on a celebrity dating app. Are there celebrity dating apps? I've never heard that before. As the story goes, when I used to be on Raya, R-A-Y-A, is this a thing? I'm sorry if I'm not up to date on celebrity dating apps and you're like, John, everybody knows Raya. Raya is a private membership. Google AI is telling me Raya is a private membership-based social network application for iOS known for its exclusivity and focusing on connecting individuals in creative industries, celebrities, and high-profile figures. It has a reputation for being harder to get into than the Harvard Business School. Really? Who knew about this? And was Nikki Glaser big enough, no offense, to get into the same thing with Ben Affleck 5-10 years ago? I mean, maybe now, but really? How did she get in? No offense. Weren't that famous until 6 months ago, Nikki. I digress again. Nikki said, when I used to be on Ray and Affleck would come across, why is Ben Affleck on a dating app? He can't pull chicks? Really? I'm totally confused here. I'm out of my depth. Don't know what I'm talking about. I'm a loser 55-year-old guy hosting a podcast in his basement. This has nothing to do with me. When I used to be on Raya and Ben Affleck would come across, I would give him a very concentrated checkmark yes, and he never got back. Nikki also told Gwyneth about Andrew Garfield saying no to her on Raya, claiming, I know for a fact he had to have seen my profile. I wouldn't have matched with him if he was interested. Gwyneth said, that would have been a good one. He's gorgeous. Now he regrets it. Then the conversation went to a 2022 interview where Glaser had first mentioned her quote-unquote kinky thing of having her boyfriend sleep with other women. Gwyneth asked her about that and whether her boyfriend had ever fooled around with other women. Nikki said that he had. Glaser then admitted it was a competition thing for her. She likes thinking that he could leave and that she has to step up her game to keep him. That brings us to Jimmy Fallon, where Nikki was on earlier this week. She talked about being on Ozempic and said, the shame is only from thin people who want you to stay fat. She said she's a fan of both Ozempic and plastic surgery. As for plastic surgery, there's a stigma around getting face work or investing in your beauty and doing all these procedures, and there's maybe a little sadness to it, but I'm also kind of like, well, it makes my life better. People treat you better when you're hotter. It's a sad fact of life, and everyone goes, that's so sad. Why don't you love the way you were born? It's like, well, why'd you go to college? Why don't you love the brain you were born with? Why did you pay thousands of dollars to that institution? Sports Illustrated spoke to Jerry Seinfeld about the Mets. Yes, baseball season is back. SI mentioned some comedians known to like the Mets. Those include John Oliver, Sebastian Maniscalco, Brewer, Ty Burrell, Jimmy Kimmel, Kevin James, Hank Azaria, Chris Rock. Plenty of pictures of Chris Rock and Yankee hats, just saying. Jon Stewart, Ray Romano, Bill Maher, who used to be a part owner, and Jerry Seinfeld, also Johnny Mac, known Mets fan. SI was curious why so comedians are Mets fans. Jerry Seinfeld said, comedians are attracted to well-drawn, outsized personalities. We don't like people that officially go about their business. We like people that entertain you and hopefully go about their business as well. I became a Mets fan when I was just so entertained by the personalities and the color versus the Yankees. You know, orange and blue versus the depressing Navy. Jerry said the Mets had a lot of personality last summer. I mean, 2024, oh my God. If you were a Mets fan at 24, you're branded for life. That was so much fun, partly because of how unexpected it was, especially after the way the season began. Oh my, we are awfully long today and a lot to get to. All right, so that was the A block. I'm going to quickly fly through the B block now, and I'm going to cut some things. This weekend, I want to celebrate the life of Mitch Hedberg, who passed away 20 years ago this weekend. On tomorrow's show, Jeff Siegel is an Emmy Award-winning filmmaker. He's the director of an upcoming documentary about Mitch Hedberg. So tomorrow is just Jeff and I talking about Mitch Hedberg. Sunday, a friend of the show, Jason Zinneman from the New York Times, will stop by. We already recorded this on Wednesday. We talk Hedberg for a little bit, and then I asked him about some other topics, including Mulaney and Bill Burr. We did not get to discuss Taylor Tomlinson. That news dropped after we were done. Today's show has a third segment. If you're in the Facebook group and feel encouraged to join us, by the way, I forget, when I was teaching my class on Thursday, I saw somebody wanted to join the Facebook group, and I loved that whoever it was, I love you for writing this, wrote, I am a porn bot. That immediately got improved. I also appreciate anyone who tries to get past my bouncers who understands how to answer, what is your quest? Anyway, if you're in the Facebook group, you've seen Dylan post things. I wanted to talk to somebody who had actually seen Hedberg live. I never saw Hedberg live, but Dylan had. So in the third section of today's podcast, half an hour of Dylan and I talking about Hedberg and some other topics of comedy. As I mentioned earlier in the week, some stuff I've had to pull forward because I don't have the weekend to put things where they should go, and other things I'm just pushing to next week. So let me just fly through here with the stuff that can't wait. From TMZ, comedian Mike Glaser got heckled by a Trump supporter in the middle of his act. The heckler called Mike a, quote, Jew pig, and this whole thing is on video. Mike was telling a joke about sitting in a corner with his weed pen. He turned his attention to one of the crowd members and asked the guy, how can I help you? And the guy in the crowd said he wasn't going to listen to some Jew pig. Mike Glaser, the comedian, clarifies the slur. The guy admits it and keeps heckling. Mike asks him to leave, and the guy says he's ordering a lift, adding some more comments I don't want to repeat. Mike tells the guy to order his lift outside. The guy responds, F you, Jew. Then, as the guy was leaving, he made a comment about supporting a political figure. This all happened at Lucky's Bar in Sioux Falls, South Dakota. A Sioux Falls comedy group apologized to Mike, saying the heckler does not represent the comedy community in Sioux Falls and was a random drunk guy who might not even be from here. This weekend in Rhode Island is the Lil Rhodey Laugh Riot. Some good names: Kevin Hart, Leslie Jones, Aziz Ansari, John O'Hurley, and Patrick Warburton. You know them from Seinfeld. Hannah Berner, Chris DiStefano, Jonathan Van Ness, Des Bishop, and Ashley Gavin. Great lineup, guys. Oh, wait, there's more. I missed the other paragraph. Josh Johnson, Melissa Villasenor, Tone Bell, Sophie Buttle, Alec Flynn, and Andy Woodhall. Wow, what a great festival. That is the Lil Rhodey Laugh Riot. That's your B block. Let me take one more break, and then a full half hour with Dylan from the Facebook group talking Hedberg and other things comedy. We're now on to the part of the weekend where we're going to celebrate the life of Mitch Hedberg. I never got to see Mitch live, but Dylan from the Facebook group has, so I invited him on to talk a little bit comedy. So I was never able to actually see Mitch Hedberg. I think I might have met him early in the Serious days. I don't actually remember because it was one of those things where you just assumed the guy would be around forever, but I never actually saw him live, but you did, which is why I invited you on here today. So what was that like? How did you see him? Did you know who he was? What was the night like, etc.?
I was familiar with him. I've always been a complete comedy geek. I watch everything. I would watch Comedy Central in the early days and all the short attention span theater, every single thing I could have a chance to watch. So I was familiar with him. I saw him under probably just about the worst circumstances you could see a comic, because you're in a football stadium with 80,000 other people. It's basically their University of Florida's homecoming weekend called Gator Growl. And they would bring in 2 or 3 very big name comedians. And for this one, it was Mitch Hedberg, John Panette, and D.L. Hughley.
Weird mix. None of that goes together.
And the following year, they had Tosh and Attell and Jim Brewer. And then the last year I was in Florida, it was Harlan Williams and Bill Cosby. They would have some pretty crazy lineups, but I was a member of the media at the time, so I had VIP seats. So I could see it pretty clearly, but you would get thrown off in the stadium because the sound would go to the upper deck of the stadium. So you would hear them laughing like 2 seconds after the joke was told. There was like a reverberation back. So it definitely made the experience stranger than typical comedy set. I think that's the only time I've ever seen a comedian in a football stadium. Hedberg destroyed. He was tremendous. The joke I remembered is an escalator can never break. It can only become stairs, which obviously I do it terribly in the retelling, but that was the one that had me giggling days later and repeating it. Here we are 25 years later, and that's the one that I still remember. So he was great. He was so different from everybody else that you see. People compare him to Stephen Wright, and then you see other people coming up who have a Hedberg vibe to him, but he was just such a one-of-a-kind comic that you just generally don't see these days.
I'm having trouble imagining him in an 80,000-seat arena just because of so much of his act was about pacing and vibe, and I'm imagining drunks yelling out, and it's just not working, but you're saying he crushed.
He crushed as far as I was concerned. I was sitting close, so I could actually absorb it. The people in the back, and I sat in the back when Cosby was there, and it's different. I mean, he came up, did his thing. It wasn't like, and it's funny because you listen to podcasts and people will talk about, I know Dana Carvey played Gator Growl in like 2009, and he was saying that it was the toughest atmosphere he ever played. It's just because it's so big, and like you said, people are screaming out random crap throughout the time. So it would be very easy to throw someone off. I remember D.L. Hughley was thrown off considerably when he went up there. He seemed in a rush to get off as quickly as possible, but Panette and Hedberg were quite good in that particular setting.
I remember Brewer talking about Gator Growl, but at that time, his closer was his AC/DC bit, which is him singing AC/DC with a band behind him. So you do that in an 80,000-seat arena. Yeah, that's really going to work well, as opposed to just Mitch doing one-liners and waiting for the laughs. And just what a tough room for him.
Yeah, I wish I'd had the chance to see him in a club. I don't even know if he was doing theaters at the time that he died. I saw something recently on him where Chad Daniels was talking about opening for him early in his career. Daniels has a great story about one of the jokes that he used was something that Daniels had said to him in a diner. You know what I like? Mashed potatoes. And he goes, you didn't even get a chance to guess, or something along those lines. A joke that obviously Hedberg can crush when told the way he would do the jokes. Yeah, I mean, I feel fortunate that I saw him. There's so many other greats that I either never saw live, or I only saw them in situations like The Cellar where they're doing 15 minutes of practice or just working stuff out. Because I saw Patrice and Geraldo that way, but I never saw them in a real setting where they're actually doing an hour or anything like that. So I feel fortunate that I was able to see Hedberg at all, but I would have done anything to have been able to see him in a club.
Yeah, I've been thinking about him a lot lately, especially in the adjacency, I'm trying to avoid the word shadow, of Stephen Wright. And I think as I compare the two, and clearly there are similarities, Stephen is presenting to the audience, whereas I feel Mitch was in it with the audience and we're all laughing at these jokes together, where Stephen is just going, here's a thought, you laugh now. Here's a thought, you laugh now. Mitch is like riding the surfboard, and he'll do a busted joke and get halfway through and be like, that didn't work. And it's funny.
As weird as Hedberg was, I think people could relate to him a lot more than they could relate to Stephen Wright. And I love Stephen Wright. I think he's a genius. But Hedberg reminds people of somebody they know, just where, you know, the stone guy who lived in your dorm or something along those lines. Obviously not as funny as Hedberg was, but I think people could relate to him a little better than some of the others who he's compared to.
And I do wonder, 20 years on, what would Mitch Hedberg in 2025 be? Is he still doing the stoner act one-liners? Is he 20 years older and doing longer chunks, like the stylized comedians tend to be shooting stars, and the brick wall comedians are the ones that tend to have the longer careers. I just wonder if he might have been, oh yeah, that guy from 10 years ago now.
When was the last time Stephen Wright did anything? And again, I'm not saying he's not still capable, but I've honestly never, if he's touring, I've missed it over the last 20 years because I would see him in a heartbeat if he came anywhere close to where I live. But I'll hear him he'll show up on certain podcasts. I think he's done Greg Fitzsimmons' podcast a couple times. And there are a few other guys I think he did Jay Moore's podcast several years ago, but you generally don't hear much from the guy at all. Like you said, it's the 20 years later. It's hard to imagine he would have been able to sustain that for that period of time, but I wish we would have had the chance to find out just because you hate to see somebody be taken away from us who is very much in his prime at the time.
So on Steven, I've been hosting the weekly comedy thing on Live One for 10 years now. Somewhere in that 10-year run, he did release a second album. He has two. And I did see him in person. It's got to be 20 years ago now, maybe 15. And as much as I love Stephen Wright, his pacing, my brain was getting numb after an hour. Like I needed the show to end. I couldn't take it anymore. I think Stephen Wright's material works better in 8-minute doses than an hour. As for Mitch, part of what we didn't get to see was he was very much in ascendancy, and we were starting to get into rock star Mitch, meaning that crowds were just rabid about him. And Lynn Shawcroft had talked to me about how he had to speed up his act at the end and it was throwing off the timing. So it'd be curious to see what peak Mitch would have been like and how the act would have morphed during that period.
It's like, obviously they're not similar comics, but the guys who rely on the quick one-liner, quick hits, kind of like Jesselnick. And obviously I know Jesselnick is not a similar comic to Stephen Wright or Hedberg, but it's kind of the line, punchline, quick hit stuff. That's a lot harder to sustain than the storytelling that I think Kreischer and Segura and so many of the others are doing these days. Yeah, I saw Shane Gillis a couple weeks ago and his was very story-based. I would think, while it's not unthinkable to imagine that somebody would be able to do that for an additional 20 years, I think it would be a lot harder than just saying, oh, hey, this happened to me last year and here's the comic version of it.
I'm doing the mental exercise of Mitch having to feed the modern social media beast, and I could argue it either way. On the one hand, I don't think of him as a crowd work comedian, but on the other hand, if you've got the crowd behind you, he could just, and I'm going to just do an innocent slam of you here, he could be like, of course, because you're wearing a baseball cap. And if the crowd's behind you, as stupid as my baseball cap line is, if the crowd's behind you and that gets a laugh, the room is, hey, yeah, baseball cap guy. Yeah, like we got him good.
Yeah, there are people like that who, like, you see the ones who do the crowd work really well. I don't see Hedberg, obviously, getting to the level where he is, because guys aren't doing crowd work in theaters. And you would like to at least think that he's not doing the tiny clubs. And if he can still come up with the one-liners that he did from 20 years ago, then he might have been able to sustain it. But yeah, it would be really interesting to have somebody who was like that, to have the longevity that only the top guys really, truly do, at least from a standpoint of not going from stadiums to theaters to arenas to the Chuckle Hut. Yeah, it would have been interesting to see what would have happened with that.
Well, I've got you. Let's talk about some other things. You're one of the moderators of the Facebook group, which is Daily Comedy News Podcast Group. Thank you for keeping the porn bots away and for starting conversations regularly. I appreciate that. At this point, you absolutely watch more comedy specials than I do. There was a point, I think it was last week or the week before, where something relatively major came out and it was like 9 a.m. and you hadn't commented on it yet. And I was like, I hope he's okay. Usually he would have watched this by now.
I was visiting my kid in college 2 weeks ago, so I didn't see Bill Burr until like a week after it came out. For me, Chelsea Handler came out at 2 a.m. this morning and I've already watched it. That's my background, where it's like I'm working, I have it on. I love specials, even bad ones. I'll trudge through. I do listen at 1.5 time speed to be able to do something in 45 minutes rather than an hour. I know you have the issue of getting through. Sometimes it's like you're 10 minutes in and be like, okay, I feel nothing. I felt the same way you did about the Burr special, where 20 minutes in, I was like, this sucks. And then after watching the whole thing, I was like, well, it wasn't horrific, but it was clearly probably his worst special that he's put out. Granted, that's a high bar, but yeah, I've always been, thankfully my wife is a trooper. I drag her to comedy shows constantly, where sometimes it's going to be like, all right, you're going to this one. And then there are a couple others where it's, yeah, this one's a little probably dirtier than you would care for, but she's a trooper with that. We don't get great shows around here, but we have been pretty lucky up in Green Bay getting Gatsy and Sebastian, and Mark Normand is coming here in a couple months. And we've seen Gillis twice in the last year. We've been pretty lucky as far as that goes. But yeah, I love the Facebook group. I love the site, and it fills a need that I hadn't found elsewhere. I had been looking for something where there are constant updates. I listen to the podcast first thing every morning. So it's the perfect way to start the day. So I really appreciate what you do.
Oh, thanks so much. A couple things you mentioned made me think of Jason Zinneman, and getting to know Jason from the New York Times a little bit has really helped me in some ways because, one, a lot of the issues where you talked about where I'll get 10 minutes into a special and bail, that's on me. That's not on the performer. As I analyze this, I can understand comedians can go up and crush for a crowd, but I'm admittedly a comedy snob because I've spent so much time listening to so much of it, and especially the years programming the radio stations. Listening to everybody's A material and the version of their A material that they chose to release on a comedy album, it fried my brain. So now if I get 10, 11 minutes into something and I'm not feeling it, there's 10 trillion things to do. When I grew up, one of the reasons I love baseball, there were 5 channels and the Mets were on every night. So I watched the Mets every night. Now I've got infinite media. If I get bored, there's 800 hours of Star Trek I can watch. So if your comedy special is not crushing it, I'm just out. And do I profile specials? Of course I do. There's not enough time. Talking to Jason and hearing him having also what I call Emperor of Rome syndrome, where you just sit there and go, oh, that's very funny. Great callback. Yes, that is hilarious. Oh, what a well-crafted bit, but not laughing. That has been helpful to me. And then also for imposter syndrome, I was listening to Marin last night, both the Nick Thune and what was the other one? Whatever. And they're all name dropping the comedians and their clubs and talking about when they're hanging out with Mulaney 20 years ago. And I'm like a fraud. But then Jason reminds me, I'm not a comedian. I'm not trying to be a comedian. I'm just like a fan, just like you are. I just chose to pick up the microphone and start talking about it. Chris Fleming, that was the other one. And it's more me than the performers. The performers are getting up. They've sold tickets. They have to crush here. But when I'm watching a Netflix special, I could just really quickly be like, what else is there to do?
It's one of those where and I think I threw this out there in the group. It was like, what was the last really, truly great special? And I'm talking, because when people are like, what are the best ones of all time? And I'm like, there are a couple of Carlins that I could list. Delirious, obviously. Some of Pryor's. Pryor probably has 3 that Chappelle's. Killing Him Softly is when people are saying, oh, that's Chappelle's best special of any of the ones that have come out in the last 5 years. And you're not even close. Just where. So it's like, I feel very much like a snob as well. When the stuff is put up there, I haven't seen anything that's on the line of Bigger and Blacker or Killing Him Softly or What Am I Doing in New Jersey or Here and Now, anything along those lines. The one that I remember where I was like texting my friends saying, you have to see this, was Gillis's Live in Austin, just because that one absolutely destroyed me. I was laughing so hard. And even then, do I put that on the level of Bigger and Blacker or Chappelle's best? No, absolutely not. As much as I loved Ronnie Chang last year, as much as I enjoyed, I know you didn't like Schultz as much as I did. Even like the Ari Shaffir one from this year, I thoroughly enjoyed. Roy Wood, same thing. Are they all-time greats? No, they're not. They're good. I thoroughly enjoyed it. But yeah, I want to see something that blows me away, and I haven't seen anything like that in
I think
probably 4 or 5 years.
I think we're all chasing the drug that is the laugh, that really good belly laugh chuckle. And I've talked about this on the show and in the group, and I'm not getting any pushback. I think people are nodding in agreement that right now we're getting the same faces doing the same specials. So yeah, we know what Bill Burr is going to do. We know what Bert Kreischer, and I like Bert's special. We know what Bert's going to do. If Segura drops one, we know what Segura is going to do. When you mentioned the last great special, what came to my mind was Natalie Palamides' Nate, which was just different and out there. And I tend to like the alty stuff a little bit, but that one was one where I watched it and I was like, oh, wow, that was different. And I evangelized for it.
I haven't even seen that one. I'm going to have to check that out right away. I fully respect your opinion on it. And yeah, I love ones that are interesting because I'll go searching for stuff where it's, okay, I'm not the target audience here, but I still want to see it. Hannah Einbinder's One Woman Show would have been one of my favorite things that I saw last year. I would have told you were crazy, but that was one that I couldn't get out of my head after watching it. So I'll go watch stuff even intentionally, be like, all right, I'm probably going to hate this, but I don't like criticizing something unless I've seen it, where it's like, and Earlier this year, I watched that, what was it, Chelsea? This is some redneck special. It's the one I have lowest rated. I actually gave it an F. It was like Pontoon something. It was like, okay, it was just too painful for anybody to sit through. And DeStefano, who I generally like, his special was horrific. I mean, that thing,
Yes.
that was an embarrassment. Did you ever watch Gringo Poppy by Brendan Schaub? They bring it up on Rogan, or Tim Dillon brings it up a lot on his podcast. It's probably like one of the worst comedy specials actually put out on I think it was a show. I don't know if it was Showtime or Amazon Prime or something like that, but it's one of those ones you watch and you're just like, ugh. And I think DeStefano's was probably worse. Yeah, that's when I can't even believe Hulu put this out, but occasionally you see stuff like that.
So what's your top specials of the year so far?
I have Schultz 1, Roy Wood, I think I have 2nd, Ari Shaffir 3rd, and then I have Kelsey Cook 4th, and Burt 5th. I was thrilled that you liked the Burt one because I'm biased. I sat next to Burt on an airplane like 20 years ago when he was early in his career, and we talked like we were best friends for 3 hours. And so I always feel like I'm biased, but I'm never going to sit here and say, oh, he's the greatest comic of all time. But he brings out the giggle factor with me, which is not easy to do. Just where you're like, okay. And I don't consider him like a lowest common denominator comic, but I will laugh at stuff that I'm like, oh God, I can't believe I'm laughing at this. He just does it for me. And I think it's very genuine with him. And I love the stories about my kids are similar ages to his kids. So I can relate to a little bit of that, even though he has daughters, I have sons, but I just genuinely like the guy. I was thrilled that his latest special is I think people are basically saying it's probably his best special, which I think it probably is.
Yeah, I've just found it fun. Now, it definitely spoke to me. Also, 50-something married dad, so I had that connectivity there. And I think, again, The Emperor of Rome, I can break down comedy and I can see The Matrix. And what Burt did there was thing that actually happened, exaggerated for effect. Step 2 is you really ramp it up and go over the top, and then maybe the tag is something that didn't actually happen. But the basic premise there, as a married man in the 50s, got what he was talking about, even if he told an exaggerated version of it, even if it was colorful, even if some of the details weren't real. The basic premise spoke to me, and I think that's why I connected with that special and found it very, very entertaining.
I find him genuine. Like you said, obviously, I'm not going to sit here and say, okay, this is exactly how it happened. I'm not that naive. But there are other ones where you watch and you're like, okay, there's no way in hell that happened. And with Burt, I have no problem with something being exaggerated for comic effect. I have no problem with people making up stories. But I know there's that fine line, the Hassan Minaj line. And I like Hassan. But I thought the criticism of him was over the top a few years ago. But at the same time, I don't know. I get it on some level, but yeah, I love Burt. I took my whole family to see him a couple of years ago and they all walked out there. That was a fun show where, again, nobody's going to say he's the greatest comic of our era, but that was a fun show. So sometimes that's all you can realistically hope for.
All right, I'll ask you one more, then I'll let you go. If I had a golden ticket, I can get you 7th row center for any living comedian. Who do you want to go see?
Mulaney, no question.
Really?
Yeah, I've seen most of them. Granted, I only saw CK at the Cellar. Actually, I've never seen Rock, but I would rather see Mulaney right now than Rock. I'm trying to think of the other big ones who I haven't seen. I saw Chappelle when he was working out, Killing Him Softly. So I've not seen him recently. I've seen Segura. I've seen Burt multiple times. I've seen Gillis multiple times. Mulaney was here 3 years ago, like right after COVID. And there was a reason why we couldn't go, but I've been kicking myself since then, especially since he's only blown up. This is when he was like straight out of rehab, and I loved his last special, especially like when he
Are
finished.
You digging his TV show?
I've not seen his TV show yet. I watch other than sports, I watch nothing live. I'll go back and watch. I've heard it's not very good. I don't know if that was just from listening to your podcast.
Everyone is saying it.
I know other people who are huge Mulaney fans who are like, it just doesn't do it for me. I think I would like to see him in a regular late night structure. I would love to see him take over for if Kimmel retires or any of these guys walk away. I'd like to see him, even if it's in a standard network format. I think he could play to that. But it honestly blows my mind that, in my opinion, the best current touring comic couldn't even get on air on SNL during his time there because he was by far the best writer they had. Yeah, he's the one who I would do anything to see at this point, because not so much that There aren't others that are great, but I've seen Seinfeld. I've seen Burr. I've seen Jim Jeffries. I've seen Jim Norton, all of the ones who I'm not saying are currently great, but have been great at some point. And Mulaney's the one who I've not seen.
You're smart about Mulaney. In my career, 30 years into media now, 35 maybe, something like that. When in doubt, you put a format on something. When something's not working, you put a structure on it. You put a gimmick. You go, okay, we're going to do 5 questions with Dylan. And you just, that way, there's a structure to it. If you analyze even my Dopey show, there's a structure to it. I usually put the A comedians in the front. And as we get back towards the end, now I'm talking about something that happened at a Mumbai comedy club. That's not going to lead. There's a structure to it. And I think you're right that if Mulaney were actually put in a box, it would be stronger. I think they've leaned a little too much into the chaos. You've heard me talk with Mike Chisholm about Letterman, that as uncontrolled as it seemed, it was controlled. And Dave didn't like surprises. He just presented it as chaos. I think what we're seeing with Mulaney, especially in those caller segments, which absolutely have to go, it's actually chaos and it's not working.
Well, you don't want a radio show type thing. It's television. You're watching it. Even as someone who listened to Stern for 25 years, as soon as he would go to the phones, I'd be like, all right, what else is on? Just where I don't need to have some idiot call up and ask Artie why he's so fat or something like that. But yeah, seeing him in, okay, you're going to come out, you're going to do a monologue, you're going to do this. And I wonder if Mulaney would find that to be too boring, but it worked at The Daily Show. It worked at every place that's done it. And he's a better comic than any of the ones who are doing late night right now. And I like quite a few of them, but there's nobody out there now who I feel like I need to watch every night. I do make a point of listening to the podcast version of The Daily Show, especially when Stewart's doing it on Monday night. I do still think he's probably the best out there now that Conan's not doing it anymore. Kimmel lost me a couple years ago, and I was the biggest Kimmel fan for ages. It's not a politics thing. I could really care less who any of these people support, but it's just not as funny anymore. And like Seth Meyers, his Corrections podcast is my favorite thing that he does. It just absolutely kills me. I listen to that every week. That's fantastic. But yeah, I would love to see what Mulaney could do in a Kimmel type format.
You nailed it with Howard. Even Peak Howard, there was a structure. 6 o'clock hour was the, hey, what everybody do last night? Just BS in, maybe talk about office politics. 7 o'clock, get the extended family in here, make fun of the interns, make fun of the boss. 8 o'clock was the guest. 9 o'clock was the news. There was a format. Same thing every day.
Yeah, and it was funny because I grew up in California. One of my high school friends, his brother was going to school in NYU, and he would mail back audio cassettes of Stern each week. He's like, you got to hear this guy. And my friends, that was funny. And I'm like, yeah, give me the tape. So he'd give me the tape. I had my dual cassette recorder. I would record my own copy and I would listen to it over and over again until the next tape came. I was hooked on that until the show started to suck. And I listened to Opie and Anthony a lot. I never really got into some of the other stuff, but yeah, like Opie and Anthony, I thought showcased comics better than Stern ever did.
Oh, sure.
There really weren't that many comics that, or I should say big comics that were showcased that or became big because they were on Stern. I know DePaulo was on a lot and Kennison was on a lot early on, but I don't think it's accurate to say that they became famous from being on Stern, while there's a long list of comics that you could say they went next level because of going on Opie and Anthony. The same way a lot of these comics have gone to next level by going on Rogan these days, where I mean, like Ari was the one who I always thought he'll never graduate to theaters because he's too controversial. Even he's gotten to that level. You see where Gillis was 2 years ago and where he is now. And I think a lot of that is due to, one, he's fantastic. Two, going on Rogan almost once a month definitely helps him. Doing the Protect Our Parks has shot him to the next level. Mark Norman, who is pretty dirty to go to the theater level. I'm seeing him in a theater in 2 months. I think he's a genius too. Just absolutely destroys me. I think he's another one who I think is one of the best working. Sam Morrill's another one who I have not seen, who I would really love to see, but haven't had a chance yet. If he comes to Wisconsin, he only goes to Milwaukee. If he came up here, I would go see him in a heartbeat.
I think all the guys you mentioned, we're just seeing the pushback, not even about cancel culture or PC culture. I just think everybody has taken a step back towards, you know what, we're all friends and we make fun of each other. And if you and I hung out every day, I've got quirks, you've got your quirks, we'd bust each other's chops about it. That's what friends do. And I think that's coming across in a lot of the comedians you just mentioned, that it's, dude, we're just out having a good time. Don't analyze every sentence that's said. And sometimes a joke is just a joke.
Yeah, it's really unfortunate that it's one thing when somebody comes out and says something really stupid and then they apologize for it a day later or something like that. It's another thing when you're pulling stuff from 20, 30 years ago and saying, oh my God, Jimmy Kimmel did blackface. Jimmy Fallon did blackface. It's like, okay, if you want to say, hey, I regret doing this 20 years ago, fine, I get it. But even some of the comics who consider themselves woke these days, and I'm not saying, I don't mean this as like a knock, but Sarah Silverman or Patton Oswalt or some of these people, they're like, yeah, if you listen to my stuff from 20, 25 years ago, I use all the words that we're not allowed to say anymore. It's like everything changes, but I think we're seeing less and less of that. Considering the show I just saw where it was, because I saw Gillis when I was in Colorado and Big J was there. Although Big J, who I generally love, was horrible. He was just clearly up there, basically like sleepwalking through it. But Dan Soder was tremendous. And the other guy, and they were talking about cancel culture where they're saying, this word's coming back. This word we probably won't hear again. You can imagine which one that one was. But you're basically saying this word's coming back, this word's coming back. And it's like just because of the way it's, and again, I'm not saying it's okay to use. I try to avoid using the same words in my daily life, obviously. But I don't cancel culture on any level because it's, look, if you don't think something's funny, don't watch it. The same thing that is the same criticism with Stern. Hey, if you're offended by what he says, change the channel. I changed the channel on Stern because I thought I didn't like the direction he was going. I'm not going to sit here and say he should be taken off the air because if he still has an audience, then he should be allowed to address that audience.
Yeah, I've written on my Substack about it. I'm not going to sit here and say that I didn't laugh at a lot of things Stern did in the 90s that Stern himself has distanced himself from. Guilty as charged, laughed at them. It was a different time.
That's the thing that I hate, that he has two channels that are fully dedicated to his stuff and all of his best stuff is gone. He doesn't even play the 9/11 show anymore, which blows my mind because that was something that I felt so connected to because like on the day that happened, I sat in my car and listened to it because everybody else went to news and Stern stayed on the air. And I just sat there and listened to it nonstop. And then I listened to it again that night when they replayed it. And it was so brilliant. And he's even distancing himself from that. So I find that to be sad because as somebody who loved him for so long, and again, I don't expect the 65-year-old to do Bongo Fiesta. Like, I understand people evolving. When people who had been guests on his show for 20 years, he just randomly just basically shuts the door on them. We're not having them anymore. I thought it was very sad that Gilbert wasn't on during his final days. The whole thing with Artie was basically what closed my door on Stern, just because I absolutely loved Artie and thought he brought the show to another level. But so many of these comics and people who he had on that he just basically ditched, that never sat well with me.
Poor Artie, worked with him a few times. Great guy in real life, but I remember we were at one of the comedy festivals, and I'm going back a bit, maybe it was the Vegas one, and I said to Mark, my series host, while watching Artie live, I go, if we wake up tomorrow and he's dead, I'm not going to be shocked. He was just out of control. He's got demons, good guy, good soul, but boy, the demons got him.
I saw him on one of the Stern showcases, and it was a painful show because you're sitting there watching Richard and Sal doing something that masquerades as comedy. And I think Yucko the Clown might have been there, where I'm sitting there going, oh, God. Like, if Artie wasn't coming up, I think it literally went like Stuttering John, DePaulo, and then Artie. So it was like, okay, I just got to get through Stuttering John. And I generally like Stuttering John, but as long as I can get through Stuttering John, I'll be fine through DePaulo and Artie. And DePaulo's a genius. And then Artie came out, and there are comparisons to Kreischer, although Kreischer obviously isn't as completely messed up as Artie is, but same thing where he came out and did all his shtick, but the crowd just loved him. But like you said, if I'd woken up the next day and they said, yeah, Artie didn't wake up, I would have been like, no shock there. It's not like Hedberg where you're like, no. Although I did not know that, and I'll be curious to hear your shows. I'll be curious to know if those close to him knew how bad his drug habit was. I get the sense that they did. The same thing with Geraldo, and obviously nobody was stunned when Patrice died, but it still didn't make it any less sad, just because you always hate seeing these comic geniuses taken from us too soon.
Yeah, and it happens to so many. All right, 10 minutes ago, I asked you one last question, so I'm going to let you go. You won't have to listen to this episode because you already know what we said, but I appreciate you. Thank you for taking care of the Facebook group as one of the moderators. Appreciate you coming on. I think we'll have you back. I like talking about comedy with people, and it's fun to just drop one of these in.
Yeah, I appreciate everything you do. I had been looking for something like it for a long time, and when I stumbled on it, I was like, this is exactly what I want. You do an amazing job. And I listen to a ton of podcasts. So it's like when I start my day with yours, that's a pretty big compliment.
Thank you. I also tonally try to do it as a morning show. I'm not a yeller or a screamer. So I think it's easy on the ears at 7:30 in the morning. It is one of the program designs of it.
It drops at the perfect time. And it's the perfect length for like first thing in the morning. Be like, okay, and I listen at double speed. So I got 7.5 minutes for perfect way to start the day.
I really do go to the National Donuts chain every morning. It tends to magically work out that my drive to coffee hits, usually I hit the parking lot right as the show gets to the commercial break, and then I listen to the rest on the way home. But I do listen, not that I'm a narcissist, I listen to see if I made a production error, because every now and then I make a production error and then I try and catch it before everybody else does.
No, I get it. And yeah, one of many shows that I listen to, but it's definitely in my daily routine.
That's a long episode of Daily Comedy News. Tomorrow, Jeff Siegel, documentarian. We talk about his Mitch Hedberg documentary and celebrate the life of Mitch Hedberg. Sunday, Jason Zinneman, friend of the show from the New York Times. We also talk Mitch Hedberg. See you tomorrow.
If you're fascinated by UFOs, aliens, ghosts, demons, cryptid creatures like Bigfoot, Chupacabra, and Mothman, then I have the show for you. The Paranormal 60 with Dave Schrader. Each week, we investigate different claims of the supernatural and try to shed light into the darkness, bringing you the top guests and experts from around the world. Enter the fray. Then join me, Dave Schrader, your host, as we investigate all aspects and claims of the supernatural and paranormal. Listen on all of your favorite podcast platforms: Good Pods, TuneIn, Pocket Casts, Deezer, Player FM, Amazon Music, Audible, Podcast Addict, Podchaser, Google Podcasts, CastBox, Spotify, iHeartRadio, and Apple Podcasts. The answers to life's biggest questions and miracles and mysteries awaits you. So join me each week, 2 brand new episodes of the best in paranormal podcasting, The Paranormal 60 with Dave Schrader.